All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. And in this video, we're going to be in the 147-pound division where Gervonta Tank Davis's team issues a warning to Jaron Ennis about the competition at 147. And in this video, we'll also answer the question that has been asked widely in the boxing world as to whether Jaron Ennis should stay at 147 or move to 154. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. And in this video, we're going to talk about something that was said by Gervonta Davis's team in the body of, or the person of, Kenny Ellis. In an interview with Mill City Boxing, shout out to Mill City Boxing, issued a warning to Gervonta Davis of sorts that Brian Norman has a chance to beat him. And that, unlike other people, they want to see Jaron Ennis fight Brian Norman Jr. Now, before I get into the details of it, let me welcome you back to the channel. Please hit the subscribe button. Also, share the video, and thank you to everybody that supports the channel in the super chats and in the super thanks of videos like this. It really goes a long way towards supporting the channel. But let's get into this because Mill City Boxing gave a very, very, very good interview, does really, really good work over at his channel. So definitely want to acknowledge him for his work, and also ask you to go over there and subscribe to him so that you can get some really quality news. He interviewed Kenny Ellis. Kenny Ellis, if you're not familiar with him, is in the corner of Gervonta Davis and is one of Gervonta Davis's key trainers. He is responsible for the most part within Gervonta Davis's camp for developing the strategy, watching other fighters, learning the tendencies of fighters, what they like to do, what they don't like to do. And so he's therefore a very valuable part of the brain trust of Gervonta Davis. So when asked about what he thinks that Gervonta Davis should do next, and talked about, the controversy going on between Jaron Ennis and Brian Norman Jr., he basically stated that he wanted to see the fight.
Do you feel like that's the fight at welterweight that everybody wants to see, Norman and Boots?
Yeah, because there's so much animosity between the camps right now, and they pumping it up, and that's who they want to see next. And I think it's perfect time. They're both coming off great wins. Time is now, and he's 24 years old. But the greats, the elites, they did it between the ages of 20 and 24. They captured belts. You know what I mean?
Now, just to give you a little bit of context, there was an issue between Brian Norman Jr. and Jaron Ennis, and their camps going back and forth to each other about a fight between the two. Currently, Jaron Ennis is the 147-pound IBF champion, and he was being challenged by Brian Norman Jr., who not too long ago won the WBO welterweight title. However, my understanding is that Brian Norman was offered $1.7 million for that fight, and Brian Norman's team basically said, no, Brian Norman's only 23 years old. Jaron Ennis is 27 years old. We have time to develop ourselves and get ourselves in a position where we can be the best that we can be when we face Jaron Ennis, or we face people like that. So they decided that they were going to go a different direction. That's my understanding. However, of course, there's always the back and forth about who's ducking who did what, whatever. But aside from that, and that background that led into the question itself, Kenny Ellis clearly says, look, man, he believes that Jaron Ennis is really, really like that he's the best fighter in that division, one of the best fighters in the sport, period. But Brian Norman is nothing to sneeze at, and something that Jaron Ennis needs to take very, very seriously, especially as Brian Norman matures into a fighter. From the time he's 23 to 24 to 25, you might be able to see exceptional growth out of Brian Norman Jr. Specifically, what Kenny Ellis said about him was, look, man, that guy can pop, and that he is a better fighter than Amanda Stanionis, who Jaron Ennis just beat last Saturday night. Now, that's kind of saying, comparing one man to another and saying one has to be rich and one has to be poor when one guy has $10 and the other one has 12, right? So yeah, Brian Norman may be slightly better or maybe significantly better than Stanionis, but is that really enough to make up the gap in skill and the talent between Brian and experience now between Brian Norman and Jaron Ennis? But Kenny Ellis was very, very clear. Like, he would like to see Jaron Ennis fight Brian Norman because you never know what's going to actually happen in a boxing ring. Because, at the end of the day, it really does matter most what that person feels like and how that person's going to fight that day. There's a book that I often reference. It's called Only the Ring Was Square. And it talks about the matchmaking in boxing in the 1930s and the 1940s, 1950s, and how the real matchmakers and the people that were really behind the fights always knew that all bets were off between two fighters if one of the fighters didn't feel well that day. So in the case of like Sonny Liston before he went in to fight Ali the first time, what was put in this book was that they knew that Sonny Liston didn't feel good going into the fight with Ali. And then when he came out of the fight with Ali, he was just all messed up. So they believe that it was that day that really affected the outcome of that fight. So when you look at Brian Norman and you look at Jaron Ennis, and even though you look from the outside looking in, that you say, okay, there's no way that Brian Norman can beat Jaron Ennis. Yes, there is, because as long as you got 2 fists and 2 feet and a head in that boxing ring, you have the ability to win because you never know what's going to go on that specific day. There's been upsets, all kind of upsets in the sport of boxing where somebody just didn't have it that day or somebody was just really, really on one that day. And when you have the skills of Brian Norman, that could pop up for you on that day. Right now, I think Kenny Ellis was very realistic when he said, he gives Brian Norman a puncher's chance, right? But saying, obviously he really does lean heavily towards Jaron Ennis, but still, Brian Norman is the WBO champion. There are 4 belts there are 4 major belts in boxing: the IBF, the WBO, the WBA, and the WBC. Currently, Jaron Ennis holds the WBA, and the IBF. And so he's a unified champion. He only has 2 more people to beat to become undisputed, and that's Brian Norman Jr. and Mario Barrios. So for the sake of Jaron Ennis's career, I think that he should do whatever he needs to do in order to get that fight with Brian Norman and get that fight with Mario Barrios so that he can then, solidify himself, his standing in boxing, commercial success, his skill-wise or whatever, by dominating and clearing out that weight class. Now, to the point that I brought up in the introduction, many people say, look, it's just so obvious that Jaron Ennis is so much better than everybody in the division. Should he just go to 154 where there's more competition? Well, if you listen to people like Brian McIntyre, if you listen to other trainers, they basically say, and I think Kenny Ellis said this as well, like he doesn't see anybody touching Jaron Ennis till they get to about 160 pounds. So for me, I say he should stay in the weight class, that Brian Norman Jr. is as good a competition as he's going to get at that weight division. I think Brian Norman Jr. is better than Mario Barrios too. He actually has to, instead of taking the approach that many fighters do, which is looking at him and saying, he's not good enough to fight me. No, go in there and prove that you're better than that man on the day of the fight and get the work done. And if you wind up blowing him out, so be it. If you wind up getting a tough fight, hey man, probably because you didn't expect a tough fight, similar to Gervonta Davis when he faced Lamont Roach. Anyway, that's my take on the matter. Please let me know what you think in the comment section. Share, like, and subscribe, all that good stuff. And with that, I'm out. Deuces.